The German shepherd limped through the neighborhood, his once strong legs now weakened by a broken limb. Blood dripped from his injury as he staggered forward, but no one stopped to help. Strangers passed by, their eyes glancing over him for a moment before continuing with their busy lives. Duke Hope was fading with each painful step, his heart heavy with the realization that no one seemed to care. But then, a tiny voice called out. Lily, a toddler with big, compassionate eyes, had been playing in her yard. As she watched Duke struggle, something inside her shifted. Without hesitation, she waddled toward him, her small hands reaching out to comfort the suffering dog. "Doggy hurt," she whispered, as if she could heal his pain with the touch of her tiny fingers. Her parents didn't see it at first. They were too busy to notice. But Lily's innocent love for a creature in need was undeniable. Her gesture, small yet profound, would soon touch the hearts of everyone around her. Duke had found a friend when the world had turned its back, and it was a baby's love that would remind them all of the power of kindness. On a bright and sunny morning, the kind of day that painted the sky a crisp blue and made everything feel just a little bit brighter, Duke, a once proud German shepherd, limped down the street. His fur, once glossy and thick, was matted with dirt and stained with blood that had dripped from his injured leg. Each painful step he took seemed to weigh him down more, and though the warmth of the sun bathed his body, he felt nothing but the cold ache that pulsed through his wounded limb. Duke's broad chest heaved with exhaustion, and his tail, which used to wag energetically when he saw a friend or a passer-by, now hung limply at his side. His face, once noble and filled with confidence, had softened into one of weariness and sorrow. Blood trickled steadily from the deep gash in his paw, the injury leaving him with no strength to keep moving quickly. His breathing was shallow, and his eyes, which once sparkled with joy, were now clouded with the overwhelming pain and confusion of being ignored. He had been wandering the streets for what felt like hours, a victim of a cruel fate that seemed to dismiss his suffering at every turn. The neighborhood around him was quiet, peaceful, and filled with the buzz of everyday life. People jogging, mothers walking strollers, and neighbors chatting over fences. But no one seemed to notice the injured dog, desperately dragging himself along the curb, his leg making each step a slow, agonizing effort. Duke looked up at the faces of passers-by, but their eyes darted quickly away as soon as they saw him. Some walked with purpose, glancing at him for just a second as if seeing him was an inconvenience. Others simply kept walking lost in their own worlds, unaware of the silent cry for help in his sorrowful eyes. A few people saw the injured dog and seemed to take notice of his distress, but their glances lasted only a fleeting moment. One woman even crossed the street to avoid him. Another man paused to look at Duke, but then shook his head and walked away, muttering to himself about how he was sure the dog was just another stray. It was as if Duke Payne didn't exist, a whisper in the noise of the world around him.
The harsh reality was that Duke was invisible, not because of his size or stature, but because the people around him were too absorbed in their own lives to acknowledge the silent plea for help that radiated from him. And with each step he took, the weight of the world seemed to press further down on his fragile body, his heart breaking with each moment that passed without anyone coming to his aid. As he limped forward, Duke could smell the familiar sense of neighborhood, fresh-cut grass, blooming flowers, and the unmistakable scent of someone's backyard barbecue. His body yearned for a moment of relief, for someone to step forward and offer the care he needed. His muscles were sore, his spirit battered, but Duke kept moving. There had to be someone, anyone, who could help him. And then, as if fate had finally decided to show him a glimmer of hope, Duke saw something that made him pause. A little girl playing in her front yard. Her laughter rang through the air, the sound of it so innocent and pure that it made Duke's heart ache in a way he hadn't expected. The girl was sitting on the grass, giggling as she pushed a small toy truck back and forth. She was completely absorbed in her play, her small fingers working the wheels with concentration. Duke watched her for a moment, his tired eyes locking onto her every move. There was something about her, something in the way she moved, in the way she looked at the world, that made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't entirely alone. As he limped closer, something changed in the little girl's demeanor. She stopped playing, her eyes lifting from her toy to gaze at the dog. At first, she tilted her head in curiosity, her chubby cheeks flushed from the warmth of the sun. But when her gaze settled on Duke's injured leg, her expression shifted instantly. Lily's big brown eyes widened in concern, a softness sweeping across her face. The playful joy that filled her body just seconds before it disappeared, replaced with an emotion that was far more mature for someone so young. Empathy. She didn't understand the depth of Duke's injury, nor could she fully comprehend the pain that coursed through his body, but she could feel something was terribly wrong. Duke didn't move. He stood there, exhausted and trembling, his leg aching with each heartbeat. His body was a patchwork of pain. But his heart, fragile as it was, recognized something special in the girl's gaze. For a long moment, there was only the silence between them, the world around them pausing for an instant as Lily's soft brown eyes locked with Duke's weary ones. Without saying a word, Lily pushed herself up in the grass, her tiny legs wobbling slightly as she took a few unsteady steps toward Duke. Her little hands reached out instinctively, her baby-like fingers brushing the air as if she could somehow ease his pain just by being near him. She didn't hesitate, nor did she seem afraid. There was something in her that told her she needed to act, and so she did. Duke, exhausted beyond measure, lowered his head slightly, allowing the girl to get closer. He could feel the warmth of her small hands near him, the gentleness of her touch as she slowly reached out to him. She didn't try to pet him or speak to him in any way. She simply looked at him with wide, innocent eyes that said more than any words could. In that brief, quiet moment, it felt as though the world had finally seen him. It felt as though, after hours of pain and despair, someone small, someone pure, finally understood. Lily's eyes softened and she repeated, "Doggy hurt," her voice barely a whisper, as though she was speaking to herself more than to Duke. The little girl took another hesitant step toward him, her tiny fingers brushing the matted fur on his side. It wasn't much, but it was everything in that moment. Duke's tail gave a weak, exhausted wag. It was as though the warmth of her tiny presence was enough to soothe his battered soul. And for the first time in hours, Duke felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. This little girl, this small, innocent child, had done what no one else had. She had noticed him. Lily, undeterred, wobbled a bit and then turned back toward the house. She didn't know what to do, but she knew she couldn't leave Duke alone. Her tiny hands reached up to tug at her mother's skirt, her voice urgent but soft. "Mommy, doggy hurt," she cried out. Duke watched her, his eyes following the little girl as she ran inside, her small figure disappearing behind the front door. Her concern, though simple and unspoken, was the only thing that had mattered to him in those long hours of searching for help. And so, for a brief, fleeting moment, Duke's broken heart dared to hope once more. Lily's parents were inside the house, unaware of the developing connection between their daughter and the injured dog outside. The hum of the refrigerator and the clink of dishes filled the air, masking the soft whispers of a tender moment unfolding in the yard. Lily, however, was completely engrossed in Duke. Her small feet shuffled across the grass as she made her way toward the German shepherd. She knelt down, lowering her body to his level. Her little hands brushed against the soft fur of his back as she studied him intently. Duke, too exhausted to do anything else, remained still. His body ached with every fiber of his being, but there was something peaceful about the girl's presence. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had taken a moment to care for him, to simply be present and see him, not as a stray or an inconvenience, but as a creature in pain, longing for compassion. Lily's gaze was steady and filled with a gentle curiosity as she observed him. She looked at his leg, which was swollen and bloodied, and the depth of his pain was evident to her, even if she didn't completely understand it. Her brow furrowed as she noticed how still he was. Her tiny hands hovered above him for a second before she reached out to touch his fur. Duke didn't pull away. He didn't flinch. Instead, his weary eyes met hers. It was as if they understood each other in that moment. Two beings, each dealing with their own kind of pain. Lily's touch was soft and tentative, but it was also filled with warmth that Duke could feel in the depths of his tired soul. "Are you hurt, doggy?" she whispered, her voice high and soft, filled with innocent concern. It wasn't a question that needed an answer, for the words were more of a comfort, an acknowledgement of his suffering. Lily didn't need him to speak. She could see in the way he moved, the way he lay on the ground, too tired to lift his head, and the way his eyes slowly closed, as if willing himself to endure the pain. Duke's heart fluttered in a strange way. He hadn't felt this kind of care in so long. She wasn't scared of him, nor was she worried about the mess of his blood-stained fur. She simply wanted to be near him, to offer him the only thing she had, her attention and her soft, gentle touch. Lily's small fingers carefully brushed over the gash on his leg. Duke winced slightly, but the pain was bearable in this moment, overshadowed by the comfort of her presence. Her touch was delicate, like a feather brushing against him, and it made him feel less alone. Lily winced, too, as she felt the tenderness of his injury beneath her touch. She didn't fully understand what she was feeling, but there was an instinct within her, a need to help, even if she didn't know how. Duke's eyes softened as they met hers again. His tail gave a weak wag, a tiny motion, but enough to convey his gratitude. The girl didn't know how much her kindness meant, but in that simple gesture, she had offered him more than any of the indifferent strangers who had passed him by. Lily stood up slowly, her tiny legs wobbling beneath her. She looked back at Duke one more time, as if silently promising that she wouldn't leave him alone. With a determined look in her eyes, she turned and waddled back toward the house, her small feet pattering across the pavement, leaving a trail of dust behind her. Duke watched her go, his heart heavy with a strange mixture of sadness and hope. He hadn't expected this. A part of him had resigned himself to the idea that no one cared. No one saw him as more than a stray dog. No one bothered to take a moment to acknowledge his pain. But this little girl, with her innocent eyes and quiet compassion, had changed everything. Lily ran inside the house, her tiny hands gripping the doorframe as she pushed the door open. She called out to her parents, her voice high with urgency. "Mommy, doggy hurt. Mommy, doggy hurt," she cried, her small body shaking with concern. Her parents, busy with their own tasks, didn't hear her immediately, but Lily's voice carried an urgency that could not be ignored. She tugged at her mother's skirt, pulling at her with gentle but determined hands. "What is it, sweetie?" her mother asked, turning around to face her daughter, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Doggy hurt," Lily repeated, her voice growing more insistent. "Doggy hurt outside. Leg hurt." Her mother paused for a moment, taking in the sight of her daughter's worried expression. The urgency in Lily's eyes made her stop whatever she was doing. There was something in her daughter's voice, a tone of deep concern, that couldn't be dismissed. She could see that Lily was upset, that this was something important. Okay, sweetie," her mother said gently, wiping her hands on her apron before walking toward the front door. Lily quickly grabbed her hand and pulled her outside, the little girl's determination now evident in every step she took. As they made their way across the yard, Lily's small voice grew more frantic. "Doggy hurt. Mommy, help Doggy." Lily's mother couldn't understand the full extent of her daughter's urgency, but the sight that greeted her when they stepped outside quickly became clear. Duke was lying in the grass, his body sagging with exhaustion, his head resting on the ground, his eyes gazing up at them. Her heart dropped in her chest when she saw him. The dog's leg was twisted and swollen, the blood still fresh and pooling around his paw. It was clear that he was in serious pain. But what struck her even more was the tenderness in her daughter's voice, the way she had acted so quickly to seek help for this animal. Lily's mother knelt down beside Duke, her hands trembling as she reached out to gently touch his head. Her eyes met Lily's, and she could see the silent understanding in her daughter's gaze, an understanding that was far beyond her years. Without a word, Lily's mother picked up her phone, dialing for help. But as she did, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for her daughter's compassion. There was something raw and pure about the way Lily had instinctively reached out to this dog in need. For a brief moment, all the chaos of the world seemed to fade away. It was just Duke, Lily, and her mother, the beginning of something deeply beautiful, a silent understanding between a child and a dog who had both experienced pain in different ways, but who had found solace in one another's presence. Inside the house, the scent of fresh bread and simmering stew filled the air as Lily's parents busied themselves in the kitchen, preparing lunch. The rhythmic clinking of pots and pans echoed through the cozy space, a stark contrast to the quiet tension building outside. They were wrapped up in the little details of the day, unaware that their daughter had already stepped into a moment that would change everything. Lily, however, was far from the calm pace of the kitchen. Her tiny feet pitter-pattered across the floor, her face flushed with worry. She could hardly contain the urgency in her steps as she burst through the kitchen door, startling her mother as she tugged desperately at her skirt. "Mommy, Doggy hurt. Doggy hurt." Lily's voice trembled, high-pitched with distress. She was out of breath, having run as fast as her little legs would carry her, but the worry in her eyes said everything her words couldn't express. Her mother, caught off guard by the sudden interruption, turned around with a smile. She tried to soothe her daughter, assuming it was just another playtime concern. "What do you mean, sweetie? What doggy?" Lily didn't wait for her mother to finish speaking. She grabbed her mother's hand firmly and tugged at it with all the strength her small frame could muster. Her big, brown eyes were wide with alarm, and her voice quivered with urgency. "Doggy, hurt leg, outside." It only took a moment for Lily's mother to realize that this wasn't some trivial matter, as the seriousness in her daughter's voice cut through the casual chatter of the kitchen. The smile faded from her lips, replaced by an expression of concern as she followed Lily toward the door. Lily led the way, walking briskly out into the front yard. The world outside was bathed in the soft light of midday, but the peacefulness of the scene was shattered when Lily's mother saw Duke. Her eyes immediately landed on him, the German shepherd, lying motionless in the grass. His once proud posture had slumped in exhaustion, and his injured leg was stretched out before him. The wound on his leg was severe, dark, swollen, and still oozing with blood. It was clear that he had been suffering for some time, and every second that passed without help was another second of agony for him. "Oh my God!" her mother whispered in shock, her voice catching in her throat. She hadn't noticed the dog earlier, too caught up in her own tasks. But now, seeing him in such a state, the full weight of the situation crashed down on her. Her heart clenched with both fear and sympathy as she knelt beside him. Duke's eyes flickered weakly as they met hers, a glimmer of hope in his gaze, as if he finally believed he had found someone who cared. The urgency of the moment was undeniable. Duke was in desperate need of medical attention, and there was no time to waste. Without hesitation, Lily's mother dashed back inside, pulling her phone for her pocket as she dialed for help. The moment she hit send, she could feel the knot in her stomach tighten. This wasn't just a matter of getting a dog to the vet. It was about saving a life, about making sure that this animal who had been left to suffer wouldn't be forgotten. But as Lily's mother hurried to make the call, it was Lily's next action, something so small, so simple, that would truly leave everyone in tears. Lily hadn't moved from Duke's side. She stood beside him, her tiny hands resting gently on his fur as she watched her mother work. Her innocent face was filled with concern, her small lips pressed together in thought. She understood the urgency of the situation. She could see the pain in Duke's eyes, the way his body trembled with exhaustion. But she wasn't waiting for the adults to fix everything. Lily knew, in her own way, that Duke needed more than just medical help. He needed comfort. He needed love. With a quiet determination, Lily knelt down beside the dog, her knees sinking into the grass. She didn't speak, but the look in her eyes said everything. Duke watched her, his tired eyes meeting hers again, and in that moment, something deep within him stirred. He was no longer alone. Lily carefully reached out her small hands, one after another, and gently stroked Duke's fur, as though she were trying to reassure him. Her touch was soft, tender, and filled with a kind of instinctive care that only a child could offer. She wasn't worried about the blood on his leg, or his dirted fur. She wasn't concerned about what the neighbors might think if they saw her comforting a strange dog. She simply knew, in her heart, that he was hurting, and that was all that mattered. Duke's body shuddered slightly at the sensation of her touch, but it wasn't from fear or pain. It was from the quiet relief of knowing that someone cared. His tail, which had been motionless for so long, gave a weak but genuine wag. His head, which had rested so heavily against the earth, lifted slightly as Lily continued to soothe him with her gentle strokes. Lily whispered to him softly, her words a tender comfort. "It's okay, doggy. Help is coming. You're not alone." Tears welled up in Lily's mother's eyes as she watched her daughter's simple act of kindness unfold before her. It wasn't the medical attention that Duke needed in that moment, though that was coming soon. It was an emotional comfort that Lily had instinctively known to provide. She had stepped into the role of healer in a way that no adult could have predicted, offering a kind of solace that spoke to the very core of the dog's soul. Lily's mother had thought that she was the one taking charge of the situation, calling for help, organizing the next steps. But in this moment, she realized that it was Lily who had truly shown her the power of compassion. It wasn't just about fixing something broken. It was about offering empathy, tenderness, and connection. It was about being present with someone else's pain, no matter how small or big the suffering might be. Lily's act of love was so pure, so simple, that it transcended everything else. It didn't matter that she was just a toddler, too small to carry the weight of responsibility. She was showing a level of kindness and selflessness that many adults would have missed, and in doing so, she was reminding everyone around her, her parents, Duke, and even herself, of the profound healing power of compassion. As Duke rested his head on the grass, his body still aching but his heart lifted by the connection he felt, he knew that he was no longer alone. Not only was help on the way, but more importantly, he had found something even more precious. Someone who saw him, understood him, and loved him without question. And for Lily, as she softly patted Duke's head, the world felt simpler, filled with a sense of peace that only comes when you give love freely, with no expectation of anything in return. It was a moment of deep understanding, a moment that would stay with both of them forever, the kind of connection that transcended words, barriers, and pain. It was a kind of compassion that could heal even the most broken of spirits. While her mother hurried inside to call for animal services, Lily remained beside Duke, kneeling on the grass, her tiny hands reaching out to comfort him, her little fingers, so small they could barely wrap around his thick fur, moved gently over his body. It wasn't the gentle, practiced touch of an adult, but something more pure and instinctive. Lily's hands were full of tenderness, as if her very touch was a promise to Duke that he was no longer forgotten. "It's okay, doggy," Lily whispered softly, her voice like a soft melody carried by the breeze. Her words, though simple and childlike, were filled with a kind of warmth that only a child could give. She wasn't just speaking to Duke. She was trying to reassure herself, too, that the world could still be kind, that even in moments of pain and fear, there was comfort to be found. Duke, too tired and broken to lift his head, let out a soft whimper, a sound filled with both sorrow and relief. His tail, weak and slow, gave a small, feeble wag. He could feel the warmth of Lily's touch and the softness of her voice. For the first time in hours, the sharp ache in his leg felt a little less intense. The panic that had been building inside him since the injury began to ebb. There was no longer the overwhelming fear of being abandoned, alone in the world. Duke's eyes fluttered closed, his heavy lids finally surrendering to exhaustion that had taken over him. But before he drifted into sleep, there was a moment of peace, the kind of peace that only comes when someone cares for you without hesitation, without judgment. It was the peace of knowing that he was not alone anymore. Lily didn't stop stroking his fur. She sat there, her tiny hands moving softly in a rhythmic pattern over his coat. She looked up for a moment, meeting her mother's gaze, and saw the tears in her eyes. Her mother, still holding the phone in one hand, kneeled down beside her and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "I think he'll be all right, sweetie," her mother said, her voice cracking with emotion. There was a trembling in her throat as she spoke, overwhelmed by the tenderness of the moment. "We'll get him help. You did a good thing." Lily's heart swelled with a quiet joy as she smiled up at her mother. Her tiny lips curled upward, her bright eyes shining with the simplicity of her pure heart. She didn't quite understand the full depth of what had just happened, or how extraordinary her actions were. To her, it was simply what needed to be done. Duke was in pain, and she couldn't just leave him. She couldn't just walk away. Her attention returned to Duke, who had finally closed his eyes in a peaceful slumber. His body, though still battered, seemed to relax in the gentle comfort of her presence. He was safe for now. Duke didn't know how long it would take for help to arrive, but in that quiet moment, he had the comfort of knowing that someone cared. Someone had heard his silent cry for help. Lily continued to stroke his fur, her fingers tracing the outline of his back in slow, deliberate motions. The sound of her soft voice filled the air once more as she whispered the words that seemed to come so naturally to her, the words of a child who had already learned the power of love. "You're not alone anymore, doggy," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. "We're here." The words lingered in the air as Duke let out a contented sigh, his chest rising and falling gently with each breath. The bond between them, though formed in such a short amount of time, was unbreakable. It was a bond of one soul reaching out to another, offering compassion, understanding, and comfort in a moment of need. Duke, the injured dog who had wandered through the world with no one to notice, was no longer alone. In Lily, he had found not just a savior, but a friend, a little girl who had instinctively known what to do without needing anyone to tell her. Her mother watched quietly, her heart overflowing with emotion. She had always known Lily had a big heart, but to witness her child's instinctive care for this dog, this stranger, was a reminder of something truly beautiful. Lily had shown her something that many adults would get along the way. The purest, most genuine acts of kindness come without hesitation or calculation. There was no fear, no second-guessing, just a simple, unspoken understanding that someone else's pain mattered. In a world that often moved too fast, where the weight of life's struggles could sometimes leave people feeling alone or invisible, Lily had taught everyone around her a powerful lesson. Compassion is universal, and it doesn't have to be grand or complicated. It can be as simple as a soft touch, a whispered word, and a willingness to be there for someone in their time of need. As Lily continued to sit beside Duke, her tiny hand gently resting on his head, her mother's phone call to animal services was nearly complete. Help was on its way. But for now, there was no rush, no panic. There was only the quiet, serene connection between a little girl and a dog who had both found solace in each other's presence. Lily's love, her simple but profound care, filled the yard with a stillness that felt sacred. The sun overhead shone a little brighter, and for a moment, the whole world seemed to pause. All that mattered in that moment was a gentle bond between Lily and Duke, a bond forged in the most innocent and beautiful way possible. "You're not alone anymore," Lily whispered again, her voice steady and full of assurance. "We're here." And in that moment, Duke finally allowed himself to rest. His heart, once burdened with the weight of fear and pain, was now lighter, carried by the tender hands of a baby's heart. The power of compassion had worked its quiet magic, and in the loving touch of a little girl, the world had become a little bit kinder. Duke's journey to recovery began the moment he was taken to the local animal clinic. The veterinary team, moved by his condition and the story of his rescue, immediately got to work. They cleaned his wounds, bandaged his broken leg, and made sure he was comfortable. The vet, after thoroughly examining him, confirmed what had been suspected. Duke's leg was indeed broken, but fortunately, it wasn't life-threatening. It would require some time and care to heal, but Duke was a fighter. Thanks to the love and compassion of a little girl who couldn't look the other way, Duke would have the chance to recover and live a full life. As the days passed, Duke's condition improved. The vet's prognosis was optimistic, and with each passing day, Duke regained a bit more strength. His leg, though still tender, slowly began to heal. But more than that, his heart began to heal. The loneliness and fear that had once plagued him slowly melted away, replaced by the warmth of knowing that he was no longer an abandoned soul, left to suffer in silence. Word of Duke's rescue spread throughout the community. People were deeply moved by the story of the little girl who had seen his pain and decided to act. Lily's kindness had touched so many hearts. People who had never even met Duke, but who could feel the power of her compassion to the simple yet profound act of love she had shown. Before long, a kind-hearted family, who had heard about Duke's story through friends and neighbors, reached out. They had been looking to adopt a dog, and after hearing how Duke had been saved by Lily's love, they knew that he was the one they wanted to bring into their home. Lily's parents, who had been closely involved in Duke's rescue and recovery, knew that Duke's new family would give him the love and care he deserved. When Lily met his new family for the first time, her eyes lit up with joy. She knew that Duke was going to be all right, that he would live a life filled with love, and that her part in his story had made all the difference. The family promised to take good care of Duke, giving him a forever home filled with comfort, warmth, and kindness. They were overjoyed to meet the gentle, brave dog who had captured their hearts. It was a perfect ending to the story. Duke, once lost and alone, now had a family that adored him, and Lily, whose heart had led her to act when no one else would, could rest easy knowing that her beloved friend was in safe hands. But the story of Lily and Duke didn't end there. It became more than just a rescue story. It became a testament to the incredible power of a child's love. People who had witnessed the bond between the two, whether firsthand or through retelling of the story, couldn't help but be moved. There was something so pure, so raw, in the way Lily had cared for Duke despite her tender age. It was a reminder that sometimes the most profound acts of kindness come from the smallest of us, those who still see the world through innocent eyes, unclouded by doubt or hesitation. Duke's recovery and adoption weren't the end of his journey. They were just the beginning of a new chapter. He grew stronger with each passing day, his broken leg healing, but more importantly, his spirit was mended. He had a new family who showered him with love, and every time they played together in the yard, Duke's tail would wag with joy, a symbol of the new life he had been given. He would chase after balls, roll in the grass, and curl up next to his new family at night, content and peaceful. And every time Lily came to visit, Duke would greet her with a special kind of joy. His tail would wag furiously, and his eyes would shine as he bounded toward her, as though he could never forget the little girl who would save him when no one else would. Lily would laugh, her voice full of delight, as she played with him, running through the yard, her laughter echoing through the air like music. It was a sound that filled everyone around her with warmth and happiness, a sound that reminded them all of the incredible bond that had formed between a little girl and a dog in need. Lily's parents, too, often watched the two of them together, moved by the beauty of the connection they shared. They had always known their daughter was special, but seeing the way she had acted with Duke, without hesitation, without thought of herself, filled their hearts with pride and gratitude. They knew that Lily had taught them all something that day, the power of compassion and love, and how one small act of kindness could change the world. As for Duke, he never forgot the little girl who had saved him. He would always look at her with a kind of understanding, as though he knew how much she had given him. His life, once filled with pain and loneliness, was now full of joy and warmth. He had found a family, but more than that, he had found a friend whose love was pure, whose heart was open, and whose compassion knew no bounds. The story of Lily and Duke remained etched in the hearts of those who had witnessed it, and it served as a reminder to everyone who heard it that love has the power to heal, to transform, and to change lives. It reminded them that sometimes it's the smallest of us who show the most compassion, and that, in the end, love is always the greatest healer of all. And so, Duke and Lily's story continued, one of love, friendship, and the quiet but powerful bond that can form between a child and an animal in need. Their connection was unbreakable and would last forever, a testament to the extraordinary power of a baby's heart.